Good morning, everyone. I'm very glad that we are able to present today to you the work which has been already introduced in Alicante, which is about investigation of the economics of data sharing. So I'm happy that I will have with me Eustache, which is a researcher in University Paris-Dauphine, as well as Frederic Sutter, head of the Skywise product and service line in Airbus. So, economics of data sharing is a very important topic. We calculated that at this point of time, there is probably €1 billion which is invested in many countries by European Commission in the data spaces. So what makes it so attractive and how to measure the progress we are reaching? So we have created last year a partnership between Paris-Dauphine and the Gaia-X Institute. As you probably remember, the Gaia-X Institute is that portion of Gaia-X teams which are interested in forward-looking topics, which I will detail in a minute. But what we have suggested, and I will give you the detail later on, is that it is necessary that we have an advisory board in this exercise, and this advisory board, which I will detail in a minute, is made up of the most advanced data spaces. And what we will do is to investigate the economics of data sharing through data sharing ecosystem. So basically, those data sharing ecosystems, they are new objects for economists, and they are not having yet an economic analysis which we can use to measure their progress. So what we want to do is to create an analytical framework for understanding existing ecosystem and developing future one over time. And that will be done through strengthening the analytical framework using quantitative data and qualitative analysis. So let me give you, in a nutshell, I only want to show you what is in bold, the result of the first conference we had on September 19, 2023 in Paris, in Dauphine. We discovered two elements. One, convergence of views, Gaia-X, Gaia-X, AgDataHub, all the projects which were mentioned by predecessors, Airbus, EDF, they all say that food sovereignty, industrial sovereignty, energy sovereignty require data sovereignty. So there is a complete agreement on that, but also we said we need to concentrate on what we want rather than what we do not want, and therefore we need to have clear business cases explaining how value creation is done, what are the incentives for stakeholders to join. And the subjects are absolutely real, and all these data spaces which we are building now need to answer that question. But next to this convergence, we had also differences. And we were very interested to see that we had two major data spaces on stage. One is AgDataHub, and the other one is Gaia-X. So AgDataHub said there will be no... Oops. Sorry, thank you. There will be no data space without a neutral data intermediary. That is a must. As you know, this is an element which is important in the Data Governance Act, while Gaia-X and Oliver Gonzer told us we need to avoid to have a data intermediary because we have data sovereignty which is required. So basically, I am telling you now that there will be another conference in September 12, 2024, in Dauphine again, and the topics which will be covered are the one we are addressing today, which is economy of data sharing and also technological governance partners, especially the data intermediary. We also will cover what was discussed by Pierre this morning, automated compliance, but also this idea of a curriculum development for data sharing education. Now, who are our advisory board members? I mentioned the two most advanced data spaces, Gaia-X and Ag Data Hub, but we also gain a lot of interest from Airbus, and Frederic will tell us later on, Gaia-X and EDF on this work. So basically, the aim of the study is to follow up the study carried in 2023 to understand the economics of data sharing through data sharing ecosystem and to provide a framework for analyzing data sharing ecosystem, including an analysis of the various stages in their life cycle. Luca will introduce this idea, which is absolutely fundamental. You do not build data spaces in one day. You need to go stage by stage, and if you believe you are clever enough to bypass some stage, you will pay it at one point. And the idea is to test this framework with the member, our advisory board, in such a way that by September, we can give you the answer whether this framework is resisting to the real world. Let me now introduce Luca, and Luca will present the framework as it is now, and we will be starting to test now. Luca, floor is yours.
Thank you, Hubert, for this presentation. I'm an economist researcher, but I promise I will be as less academic as possible. So what I will present to you today, first is the three main regulations that underline our topic, then a bit of theory, just a bit, to see how we can classify a data ecosystem as a club in a Buchanan definition, if there is some economist in the room, then a bit of wording and typology of data sharing ecosystem and specify the stakeholders of the data sharing ecosystem. Then we will enter the raw material of this presentation, meaning the cost and the benefit for participants to the data sharing ecosystem, and how does the data sharing orchestrator is related to the value chain that the ecosystem bring together. And finally, we will come toward the dynamics aspect of data sharing ecosystem. So just quickly on the regulatory framework, we can isolate three main European regulations on this topic. First of all, the Digital Market Act. Why? Because it intends to regulate gatekeeper, and when you see the concentration on data market, in fact, gatekeepers are often data monopolies, so we need to deal with this. The second main regulation is the Data Governance Act, and obviously it laid down a new regulatory status for data intermediaries, so it will interest us also. And finally, we do have the Data Act, which is the key facilitator for our topic today because it opens data flows and liberates the possibilities to use data and to avoid the data monopoly that I said in the first place. So, just a bit of theory. We can classify data ecosystem as a club good. What a club is a set of participants that come together to finance and to produce a good, which is non-rivalrous and which is excludable. What does it mean? If I take as an example the VOD service, this is not because I watched Netflix yesterday evening that you can't watch Netflix also. But if you do not pay your subscription, you will not be able to watch Netflix. This is the excludability condition. This excludability condition is really important to finance the good. Otherwise, if you imagine that Netflix was free of charge, no one would be incentivized to finance and to pay for it. So due to this excludability, you can condition the consumption of the good to a financial or any type of contribution. This second point is really important because when we talked about contribution to participate to data sharing ecosystem, it's not only about financial contribution, but also data or service contribution to be like active within the ecosystem. And this allows to avoid the free rider problem. So in order to make people finance or participate to the data sharing ecosystem, they need to be incentivized. And to do so, they need to extract some benefits from participating to the ecosystem. And I will go on this 2 slides later. Just let me briefly make a small word about the typology that I use and that we use in our studies. There is 2 subsets of participants in a data sharing ecosystem. There is a data sharing ecosystem participant. Those are firms that are data user or service user, data provider or service provider. Most likely they are both at the same time. And there is a data sharing ecosystem orchestrator. This is an agent that is in charge of organizing and provide governance model for the data sharing ecosystem. This orchestrator can be whether a key actor, meaning a firm that is in dominant position on one or various segments of the value chain, or it can be an intermediary. An intermediary is an agent designated by the other to coordinate the ecosystem, or an agent created like in an ad hoc fashion to coordinate the ecosystem. And this second point, this intermediary can be neutral in the DGA sense or not. So all those stakeholders and the relationship between them, the service that they exchange, the data that they exchange, and the value that they derive from it, constitute the data sharing ecosystem. So as I mentioned before, to participate to data sharing ecosystem, you need to extract some benefit. Otherwise, you will not be incentivized to participate. Here, there is something that is really major and substantial. The benefits do not come alone. There is no free lunch, they come with a cost. And the second key point about this is that they are sequential, meaning that if you want to unlock the second level of benefit, you first need to unlock the first one, and so on and so forth. So here we go. The first level of cost and benefit is due to the digitalization of data exchange. If you want to participate to a data sharing ecosystem, you will need to have data to modify your data collection process, to have standardized data that are digital, and you will benefit classically from the reduced exchange cost due to this, thanks to digitalization, like to have a lower error rate and cost and a better information conformity. Once you unlock this level of benefit, you can reach the second one, which is automation of process. Here, you will be a bit more integrated within the data sharing ecosystem. You will need to change your work habit, you will need to abolish data silo to visit your company and with your way that you frame the exchange with your competitor and with your partner, and to improve interoperability. You will benefit from the classical gain from automation, fewer delay, increased information flow, and so on and so forth. The third level of benefit that you can expect from participating to an ecosystem is optimization and reorganization cost. Here I just want to say 2 words about the lock-in effect. This is one of the costs because you will modify your internal process to comply with the rule of the data sharing ecosystem. And as when you deal with your cloud service provider, you can face some lock-in effect. And this is really important to understand that the governance and the orchestrating of the ecosystem is not neutral in this sense, because by using interoperable services, by using open source services and software, you can reduce as much as possible this lock-in effect for your participant as a data ecosystem orchestrator. So when you reorganize your process and your firm internal working, you will benefit from in-depth management, meaning you can reallocate human resources toward like more valuable processes. You have new production processes, so you have efficiency gain and cost avoidance. And finally, once you reach all those 3 steps, you can reach the so-called innovation. And this is important. So the costs here are quite classical. This is the cost of marketing a new product and the cost of research and development of this new product. And the gain is the traditional gain that you can expect from developing a new product. But what is important there is that we can notice that, in fact, innovation is not the direct and the main driver of data sharing ecosystem. This is like the cherry at the top. And to be able to eat this cherry, you will need first to comply and to be integrated through a sequence of process and costs that you will need to face. On that note, it's important also to say that to reach For instance, you can already be at the first stage because you have like a high maturity in terms of digital processes within your internal process. So you can go to the second level directly. I mean, you can reach those type of benefit and bear those costs outside of your ecosystem. Now, if we come on the second level that we isolate on data sharing ecosystem, we can see how the data sharing ecosystem orchestrator is related to the value chains that the data sharing ecosystem intend to rely and to bring together. We can do it by isolating 2 dimensions. The first one, the vertical one, is the ecosystem is organized by a key actor or not. As I mentioned, a key actor is a firm that is in dominant position in one of various segments on the value chain, and it will play a major role in terms of organizing the ecosystem. I just want to mention on this note that this is not because you have a key actor that the ecosystem will be necessarily organized by this key actor. One can think about the Data Hub, which is constructed to gain power over the key actor in the upper segment of their value chain. And on the top level, you have the case where there is no key actor, and then you will need to designate or to appoint an intermediary. The second dimension is a bit more tricky. This is the one that is horizontal. On the left-hand side, you have the one-sided ecosystem. Let me take an example. If you take the data initiative here, you bring automotive industry together in order to create a map and to collect data points that will help to design mapping services and service that will help automated car. No single constructor has incentive to do it on his own. That's why they bring together to create such initiative. And you can clearly see that in this sense, they all have the same need, they all expect the same benefit, and they all speak the same languages, meaning that they will all deal one-to-one with the EAR platform to fulfill this task. But on the right-hand side, you have multi-sided ecosystem. I don't want to tease the presentation of Frederic Sutter, but Skywise, for instance, is purely a multi-sided market. You have on one side Airbus, which need data to do predictive maintenance on their aircraft, and you have aircraft operator. They need dashboard, they need comparative analytics and comparative data just to position themselves regarding their concurrents. So you can see that you have 2 parties with different need and different expected output. So in this framework, it will call for what we call cross-subsidies, meaning taking advantages of the more incentivized to the exchange to subsidize the less incentivized to the exchange in order to make the exchange of data or service happen. Thanks to these matrices, we can classify 4 big types of data sharing ecosystem. It's important to note that each dimension is in fact a spectrum, so there is no like 4 types of data ecosystem, but this is 4 polar case, I would say. What is important that I will not enter in the detail of everything, but on the left-hand side, you will see that you have technical intermediary because you are one-sided. You do not need cross-subsidization, as I said before. And on the right-hand side, you have commercial intermediary. What is important is like a commercial intermediary is a technical intermediary plus a commercial integration within its data sharing ecosystem. So the technical intermediary will provide tool, will provide software, infrastructure, onboarding for technical meaning. And the commercial intermediary will provide the same thing, but also will focus on the business model of each participant in order to make the use cases emerge. On the same note, you can notice that the bottom left corner is the more likely to happen. Why? Because you have one-sided ecosystem, so you just have to provide technical intermediation. But also, the ecosystem is organized by a key actor, and for a key actor, because he benefits from his dominant position, it's more easy to coordinate the actor. You already have like a special relationship with each of them. And the other way around, on the top right corner, this is less likely to happen on the first period because you have like different interests to bring together with no one able to really deal easily with the coordination mechanism that it needs to be done. But it should be studied from a dynamics perspective. Why is that? is because, in fact, a data sharing ecosystem is not a static object. This is a dynamic object. And we can isolate at least 3 main stages of life of a data sharing ecosystem. The first one is the emergence, the creation of the data sharing ecosystem. The second one is the reaching of the critical mass. This is important. The critical mass is the number of use cases of participants, after which you will be viable, like self-viable. And finally, the last step in the life cycle of data sharing ecosystem is the diversification of the business model and bringing some other value chain, some other use case, and some other participant. And here you can see that going from one-sided ecosystem to multi-sided ecosystem, it's what we can call a first best. It's a path that promises you a lot of viability if it's done properly, I mean, and a lot of opportunity in terms of diversification and business creation, use case creation. But this transition comes from a cost for the ecosystem itself. It needs to additional cost of coordination to bring together different value chain with different interests and with different expectation. It needs more cost from the participant because they need to be more integrated within the data sharing ecosystem. But at the end, it will help to diversify the business case and create more use cases. So if I try to wrap up before giving the floor to Frederic, by the way, the detail of this talk and this presentation are like embedding within the position paper that is published today on the Gaia-X website, so feel free to visit it if one is interested by the details. The main takeaways are the following. The gain for an ecosystem participant are sequential from the more direct to the less direct, and you need to reach each level to reach the next one. And this is really important to focus on the benefit for the participant because it's a necessary condition that will help them to be incentivized to fund, to participate by data, by service, by money toward the data sharing ecosystem. The organization of a data sharing ecosystem rely on the value chain organization that the data sharing ecosystem tends to agglomerate, meaning the homogeneity and the complementarity of the need and the expectation of the stakeholder within the value chain, and the atomicity of the value chain, meaning the presence of a key actor and the relationship between agent and this key actor. Finally, the data sharing ecosystem need to be analyzed dynamically to understand each stage of their life cycle, which I recall this is not for convenience purpose that we isolate those stages, but they are really meaningful and so important to capture the dynamics of it and to understand the viability and to help further data ecosystem to be set up. And I'm happy to say that the next 6 months will be dedicated to test this framework, to use it to analyze already existing data sharing ecosystem and then to test it. And I will give the floor to Frederic. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. Indeed, very interesting study to give a framework, to create a framework, because what is existing in the B2C world that we all know pretty well, in fact, is hardly existing in the B2B business environment. We, in aerospace industry, didn't wait for Gaia-X trying to sketch and put in place a data space. And I would like to give 2 examples of legacy data spaces. And I say legacy because it came historically, and you will see through my examples how difficult it is to structure an ecosystem, to operate it, and to make it valuable for all participants. The first example is managed and operated as an orchestrator by Boost Aerospace. Boost Aerospace is a joint venture between Airbus, Dassault Aviation, Safran, and Thales. And it supports the business process, which is procure to pay and logistics. And this business process were very manual and very complex with a lot of errors in providing the different data. So air supply introduced in 2012 by Boost Aerospace, aimed at automating and digitalizing the procure-to-pay processes. It took us 12 years to reach 30 buy-side, big purchase order emitter, and more than 3,500 sell-side, meaning the suppliers. 12 years. If you compare with the rocket growth of the B2C data platforms, it's really a magnitude of millions difference between the billions of data space participants in the B2C and the few thousands we have, which represent about 1/5 of the global supply chain in aerospace. So you see the gap in speed and agility, and I will elaborate a little bit later on the lessons learned. But it gives you still the dimension that there is a need, mainly driven by big purchaser, in order to support and digitalize through a data space all these procure-to-pay process. Second example is on Skywise, and I am very honored to lead in Airbus Skywise data space. And Skywise started with internal business purpose. So we put in place a big data platform to support our A350 production ramp-up when we just launched this new product. And pretty quickly, after 2 years, we realized that the benefits of big data were also very important for our customers. And then we started to support root cause analysis, in-service issue findings, trying to develop the right fix to the different findings by putting together in a single data space data from in-service with the data from the design office. And rapidly, we started to optimize the aircraft reliability, the aircraft maintenance processes, and the fleet operations. After 8 years, we are now with more than 52% of Airbus fleet in service connected to the data space, which is also a very good success, similar to what we have in Boost Aerospace. So very strong success, very long to launch and implement, but still we have 48% of Airbus fleet in service, or we have maybe 2/3 of our airline customers not connected to this data space ecosystem. So why? Why? Just because there is an effort to do, an effort to convince, an effort also to give the trust framework, and to lower the barrier to entry to join such a data space. Also, the business value has to be convincing, and this is where business value is not one side only. And this is what we have implemented with Air Supply and what we have implemented with Skywise, trying to develop a two-side business value, either through higher aircraft operational availability, better fleet performance, or with industrial efficiencies for Airbus. It comes with a huge effort, I can tell you. So what are the lessons learned from those two legacy examples? First, any IT systems is not natively designed to share data, meaning there is a need to define just the framework to share data, but also the business incentives that should be shared across participants. So we need to define and to convey this common business challenge in order to make the managers, the business owners, a request to the IT managers to export data. And of course, in order to export data, the IT managers, they need to have trust. Trust in how the data will be treated, by whom, for which purpose, and how we can guarantee that this data will not be misused or shared with one of their competitors or with any leakage of IP rights. So therefore, the second lesson is you need to implement a strong data governance, policy enforcement, and also a strong cybersecurity framework in order to reach this trust. And as was mentioned by Pierre, trust is not something that you can impose. You can just give credentials in order to get in return the trust. And the last lesson is it needs massive investment. Massive investment to set up the environment and then to operate and to keep it at the level of, at the state-of-the-art level, because the effort starts when the ecosystem is in place. Before, I would say it's almost easy. We set up the governance, we put in place the right infrastructure, but then when you switch on the data space, then all the effort is continuously, and you need to have continuous investment in order to make it operational, trustful, all over the life cycle of the data space. And for that, there is a difficult equation to find. Easy equation in the B2C, I would say easy when it's there, because with this advertisement business model, the freemium business model, I would say the magic recipe has been found. In B2B, in industrial data, it's not that easy. There is no hidden advertisement, there is no things that we need or that we can invent from scratch. This shared business challenge should make it appealing. However, the price to enter should be as low as possible in order to reach the critical mass as early as possible. And in the end, someone has to pay. Someone has to pay to prepare the data, to create the common language, to exchange data all together, and we need to scale also. And this is also very important to keep in mind. A data space, when it scales, it adds operational cost, and someone has to bear for it. This is why we believe in Gaia-X. We believe in Gaia-X because we consider Gaia-X is one of the sole legitimate vehicles in Europe to convey this trustful environment, to define the architecture framework that will lower the barrier to entry, leveraging open source, leveraging a flexible approach towards IT suppliers that will cope with these open source and de facto standards. And we believe also that having this incentive to get and to follow not only one OEM, as we did in Skywise, but to have a framework that is shared across all an industry verticals like aerospace, is a guarantee that a supplier that will address not only Airbus, not only aerospace, but also automotive or other industry, they will not have to replicate their investment 10 times or multiple folds, but they will benefit from these de facto standards that Gaia-X is providing. So I am very happy to share with you those lessons. It's also a way for me to reinforce Airbus commitment and aerospace commitment towards Gaia-X framework. And this is where we believe the next level of aviation will come into force, having this data space for aerospace being put in place. And we have some projects ongoing. And hopefully this will be a big success for the next decades in aerospace in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederic. Thank you, Lucas. We have now 15 minutes for questions. You understand we are at the early stage. Now the framework is there. Frederic gave you a first feedback about that framework. As we said, next 6 months will be dedicated to make sure that this framework, when confronted to the most advanced data space, can be used properly. So do we have questions in the room? Maybe we can open a little bit the light, and you have ladies in the back to give you the microphone. Any question? Yes. You have to run all the day, I'm sure.
Hi, Michael from Delta DAO. Thank you very much for this insightful presentation. It was fantastic. I have one question about the framework you are developing. In the very beginning, you talked about how to address the free rider problem or the economic problem, the tragedy of the commons, right? And for this, you introduced the concept of the club. But there are also alternative concepts, right? So how do you think about a pay-per-use principle, which is transparent, to address this problem you absolutely have in every shared infrastructure?
I mean, you're totally right. There is other way to deal with the same issue. The question is more to find a theoretical framework that helps to answer your question and to provide material to get some insight. And in this sense, and this is our position, is to say that the club, like in the Buchanan definition, is the best way to have a starting point. But this is only a starting point. And then we need to refine this in order to integrate. And for instance, pay-per-use is a really good idea to be integrated and to refine the model to suit perfectly to data sharing ecosystem.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, just to add on to what Lucas said, we in the technical arena are accustomed to believe that open source is the ultimate, so something which is shared without cost to everyone. We have, on the other hand, purely private things. Club is not simply an expression, this is a long-term concept in economy to try to explain that you can be part of a group of partners which are accepting to pay a fixed fee to be part of the club with the hope at the end they pay more than they receive in terms of value, but later on they will get the benefit of being part of the club because things will become very valuable. What we are trying to explain, and it is the case typically, as Frederic has told you, in Boost Aerospace, at the beginning, the partners are complaining it's too high cost for the value, but suddenly, after a while, if you are not part of it, you are out of the market, okay? And so we want to explain this very thin time between too early and too late. And this is really what we are concentrating on. Martin, you had a question?
Yes, many thanks. So Martin Gourier from EDF. So many thanks for the presentation. I have a question for Frederic. You said that you took 12 years for Boost Aerospace and 8 years for Skywise, and that you have new projects. So my question is, how many years will it take?
Hopefully, we believe that in 4 to 5 years, we'll be able to reach, this is a plan to reach 10,000 suppliers. For that, it means that we think already today about the joint business benefits. It's hardly the same benefits for a large organization like a Safran, a Thales, or an Airbus versus a small and medium enterprise. And this is where these, not pay-per-use model, but a way to give, through the data space, access to business information, to SMEs that have difficult to chase for new projects potentially, to give incentivized services for them, which will be free of charge in exchange of sharing data within the data space, will make this win-win business model virtuous cycle where we can, in 5 years, hopefully reach this 10,000 supplier threshold in 5 years.
Yeah, and Martin, your question is very important. We need to take the dimension. It is not over, it's like for OpenAI, over 1 month you have 1 million customers, not like that in business, as you know. What is important is to be able to measure what make accelerate the process. So is it the case that having data intermediary is helping, as it said in the agriculture domain, or will it be slowing down, as it said by Gaia-X? As well, should we skip some steps? And Lucas has recommended not to skip any steps, and you can recognize between Frederic and Lucas' presentation, both of them are saying the time that you are spending is because you have to go step by step, refine your data, make sure you have a common understanding. Otherwise, you will miss the benefit. And one element maybe which was mentioned by Luca, which is very important to understand, what we begin to understand is you better go to a one-sided market to flex your muscle before you enter the multi-sided market. Because if you go directly to the multi-sided market, you could be lost because it is impossible to understand with your partners, okay? And I see in the room my friend with whom we have discussed tokenomics, so I'm sure you recognize that kind of discussion, which is beginning now to be pushed by economists, and economists are immensely interested to give understanding and recommendation. As you know, this is a French economist, Jean Tirole, who has created the multi-sided market concept. He got the Nobel Prize for that. We need to find something similar for data spaces and business data sharing still to be invented. So we want to contribute to that. Any other question? We have another 9 minutes. Yes?
Thank you. Big thanks to Luca and Frederic. This is Riina Luoma from VTT.
Can you raise your
Finland.
hand? We do not see you.
I'm here in the darkness, sorry. So, Frederic, have you come across and to what extent the need to start to productize, commoditize the data and information assets involved in the data sharing use cases?
Yes. Data model and what we call ontology is something very important to reflect when we think about a data space. We cannot say we will put all data for all the industry at the same time. No, we need to start with the right data to address a business challenge on top of what we have already put in place. And this is where, to be compliant with new regulation related to sustainability, to be compliant with traceability of the raw material in the different individual parts. All the value chain across all industry will face the same issues. So either each industry define its own data structure for this type of common breeds, or we find a way to have meta model being exposed and shared, and this is the purpose of these also federated services as part of the framework. And we started use case by use cases in order to structure the data. Just to give you one example, a date in an IT system, you have at least 20 different ways to code a date in an IT system. So if you do not define the conversion rules in order to interpret common data concept into one intelligible way, you cannot automate anything. So therefore, and we'd have to do it case by case.
We have time for a last question. Yes?
Frederic
two questions. Yes.
From FNet. I had a question regarding product and service innovation. Who's innovating the club, I mean the data space, the orchestrator, the participant, or all of the above?
I would say all of them. In fact, this is a common process, meaning that the innovation will be directly related to the participant that will create this new product and they will sell this new product. But they will be only able to reach this point thanks to the club, so meaning the reunion of the meeting of all the stakeholders. And it will be only possible if the data orchestrator is orchestrating good, in a sense, the ecosystem and provide them with good infrastructure and good services. So this is a common achievement. And for sure, it will benefit more to the participant, but this is a direct effect, but there is a huge indirect effect, meaning it will make the ecosystem more attractive for other type of participant, and it can allow to extract more subsidy from those participants to finance the club, meaning it will make the club bigger, and then it will benefit from all the participants. This is typically network effect.
Frederic, one further point. All the concepts which we have presented today, orchestrator, club, and so on, none of them you will find in the regulation which is already in place. And so there will be an interesting time where applying the new regulation will force to recognize that we need this concept in order to be understood by the industrial players. And this is why we are working very close with the European Commission and especially the team of Ivo Volman to show how to land gradually the new regulation in terms of Data Act, Data Governance Act, to make sure that gradually, while we are progressing in data space, we can fine-tune the regulation. Maybe a last question. Yes.
This is Florian Mohr from Fujitsu, and I have a question regarding the 10,000 customers or suppliers you want to reach out for. I believe this will be an, let's say, global supplier network with 10,000 of users. How do you build the trust in these regions outside of Europe?
So basically, we shouldn't have any closed border in this data space. It should be global, as you said, and these 10,000 suppliers out of 15,000 total suppliers are indeed coming from all across the regions. It means that we should have a framework to share the data, and this is already what we do with Boost Aerospace and Skywise, by the way. We have data collected from China, Australia, Latin America, US, and so on. And they are all transiting across networks. There is a data collector that is connected to the IT systems or to the aircraft that collects the data, and we need to give transparency on this data collector. And this is where I think this is the first pillar to enter into the data space. And once you give confidence on your cyber security framework about the way the data are transformed and then are either transiting on a peer-to-peer basis or stored if there is any need to store data, which shouldn't be the case for all the use cases, then there is an acceptance, a global acceptance. And this is what needs to be done. And for that, we need to start small with 5, 6 critical use cases that are not just related to the final integrator. Every participant in the supply chain is facing exactly the same issue for his own suppliers. And this is the magic recipe we want to implement with this open framework, but still trustful, meaning we have the credential to give the trust or to provide trust to the participants.
Okay, I guess it's now time for a well-deserved break. Since 9 in the morning, we have not stopped. So thank you, and please applaud our panelists.